Internet, with titles like the Best Travel Entrepreneur and Internet Man of the Year under his belt, our next speaker led his company to India's first big travel e-commerce IPO. He continues to oversee strategy, M&A, and international business opportunities at one of India's biggest online travel companies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and group CEO of MakeMyTrip, Deep Kalra. Welcome.
Thank you.
So you were last here about 3 years ago.
You don't call me very often. It's such an expensive conference.
No, I don't think that's true. Yeah. Lots has changed since then. C-Trip invested in the company. You acquired your fiercest rival, Ibibo Group. The founder of that company has now exited. The market's consolidated, the online market. So lots to talk about. Quite exciting, right?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I think if not all the 3 years, definitely the last 2 years have been amazing. And I think the last year has been probably the most exciting.
Let's talk about the merged entity. Prior to the acquisition, your stock price was about mid-20s. It shot up, peaked to about $40, I believe, this April. Now it's back to the pre-merger levels. It was a bloodbath at the markets yesterday, but in general, the stock went back to the pre-merger levels. Why has the market reacted that way?
I'm always amused how people follow our stock more closely than I do. I have to be honest, and I was talking to someone this morning, and I was saying, in fact, to Glenn in the morning, and I was telling Glenn, I don't think we should look at the stock price unless we are planning to raise money as a company or sell some stock privately. Why should we care? The stock market does what the stock market does. I don't think it's always a great reflection of what the company is doing. So when it shot up to 40, I don't think we did anything to deserve that. And when it's gone down below a certain level, I don't think we've done anything to deserve that. We speak to market once a quarter, by and large, unless there's some exceptional announcement like a merger or something else. And I think that's the only point of time in which you can hold a company accountable for what they've done. The rest of it is, as they say, speculative or the forces of supply and demand. So I really tend not to look at the price too often. Yes, we get an alert and we see it, but I definitely do tell all my colleagues at work not to get carried away with the stock price. It's not usually a fair reflection of how the company is doing. Many other indicators, stock price would be like probably number 99.
I think there's also been a lot of changes in the boardroom. 5 out of 10 now are new members since 2016. How does that change the conversations within the boardroom and the direction of the company as well? You've got James from C-Trip and 4 directors from Naspers joining the board as well.
Yeah. So January 16, we had C-Trip invest in us and come on board, take a board position, and really excited that was James himself. I don't know if Cindy's still here, but whether she is or not, I have to tell you that C-Trip have been just very amazing investors, very helpful. They're very busy doing what they're doing, but they still find a lot of time to answer any question, any query, dare I say, at any time of day or night. It's just amazing how responsive Jane is or Cindy is, and we used to work with Jenny earlier, and it's just unbelievable how they find time. And then James is very thoughtful, so I think getting him on board has been fantastic. C-Trip has, I think, seen some of these issues. As they say, they've, this movie is played out for them before. So there's a lot of understanding of a hyper-competitive market. And that was one of the big reasons we were so keen to have them as a strategic partner. And I think they are able to kind of, really sift through all the stuff very quickly and give you the big picture, big message. So I do tend to ping them fairly often to validate or invalidate some of the crazy ideas and notions I have. So they've been very useful. So James is active on the board. If he can't attend, then Jane or Cindy definitely attend, and that's useful. And then post the Naspers investment, since they own almost 40% of the company, and it's a 10-member board, there was equal representation, so they have 4 seats. Naspers is a very interesting company. I didn't know them actually well at all before this. they have no other travel asset, so they're really getting to know travel well through MakeMyTrip. They have some very strong verticals like classified, which they understand well, or e-commerce and some of the others, and of course they're big holders of Tencent. So I think what they bring to the table is a good worldview on beyond travel, and especially when they kind of helped open our eyes to what recently there was a global conference in Beijing, and we got a chance to meet with Tencent as well as some of the other investee companies, including Meituan and JD. And I think that was really useful, and they're able to help connect the dots. So between Bob, who's their CEO, and Oliver and Pat, who are very active on the board, I think we get a beyond travel view. And I think it'll be fair to say that these verticals and these industries are blurring. So you see a lot of that happen in China, but I think you're also seeing some of that happen in India now, where people are not necessarily being constrained to one vertical, but also getting into related and sometimes actually seemingly unrelated fields. So I think we get that from them.
Would you say that the attitude or aggression of MakeMyTrip has changed a bit since new members have come in the board, the direction, the pace at which you make changes?
Yeah, Chetan, you're right. And I think it's not so much due to the new members who've come on board, but it's really due to the fact of what's happening in the market. So the market, as you know very well, India has been really, if there's one word to describe it, it continues to be hyper-competitive. Post this merger, the expectation was from everyone, including myself, that things will be hunky-dory and we'll all live happily ever after. But the reality is that there's a big prize, and everyone wants to be the winner of every vertical in the next big frontier or the final frontier, which is India. And travel is obviously one of the most proven successful models in the online world. So everyone's kind of pitching their hat in and also making a stake to be a significant player out there. And as we also know, there are investors with deep pockets in the private space. I think earlier we were talking about just how deep the private markets have become. And you know, that's kind of a reflection of what's going on. And therefore, you know, since our mission is to be not only the largest, but definitely more than the largest, I think the best place to you know, research and buy all your travel products, we will have to make sure that we will keep share, we will keep growing share in the hotel space, and build up the same kind of brand appeal that we have when it comes to flights. I mean, MakeMyTrip is probably synonymous when it comes to flights in India, and we're getting there on the hotel stage. So I think in these early days of the hotel market, we have decided that we will definitely stay very aggressive.
So it's what, 1 in 4 Indian air traveler now books on MakeMyTrip? Or
books with the MakeMyTrip family, yes.
Yeah. So when we talk to the industry, or our industry reaches out to us to discuss Asia, obviously China continues to be the more dominant part of the conversation. India, a lot of people are attracted towards it, but they're still not really making significant efforts in the market. But if you look at the broader Indian online ecosystem, you've got Naspers, Ctrip backing you. Within the other spectrums of e-commerce, you've got these companies along with SoftBank, Alibaba, now also backing some pretty unicorns out there. So what's really happened in the market that has the Indian online opportunity really come to, like, you know, be meaningful for them?
Yeah, I mean, very simply put, 2 years ago, there were less than 150 million people online in India. Today, there are 430 million people online. So I think the telco revolution and just the aggression that Reliance and the other telcos have shown have brought just so many more people online and made this second nature for them to look for everything online. I guess if there's one thing which really pushes the offline to online behavior, it is discounting or couponing or whatever else you want to call it, and there's been no dearth of that either. So I think of the 430 million people who are online today, probably about 70 million people have bought something online at some point of time. As MakeMyTrip and our brands, we have almost 30 million customers who've transacted with us, unique customers. So now there's a really sizable market out there that's comfortable buying online. And as that number grows and gets closer to the magical 150, 200 million mark, which is really the size of some very, very big countries, people buying stuff online, then it's not surprising that every large company or every large fund in the world wants to have a share of that pie.
What's your view of the competitive landscape since merging with Ibibo? You obviously had Yatra, ClearTrip in the market. I would say not more than 4 years ago, it would be the three-horse race. Now it seems that there's a long gap between the two. There's new players come in, Oyo, Paytm, and then there's still international players on the sidelines, Booking and Expedia. So what's your view of the market?
Yeah, no, you raised a great point, and things change very fast. So I think even till 2 years ago, maybe that was the pecking order. And I think it's a result of strategic choices that you make. Till 2016, we had a very different board, a lot more independence, etc. And I think we got some great counsel. Two of those board members who are still board advisors are right here, both Philip Wolf and Frederick Lalonde. And I think we placed some strategic bets which really are paying off in a big way now. There was a time when the Indian market wasn't ready to buy online, and a lot of our competitors kept pouring money in. And there's that much you can accelerate the market, and we focused on the inbound market, non-resident Indians in the US. And then there was a time when I don't think people were ready to take the risk of booking a hotel online. They'd book a flight ticket, they'd book a rail ticket, a bus ticket, but not a hotel room because there were different dimensions maybe to it, or just the brand connotations needed a lot more assurances. And that's begun to change in a rapid way, but luckily we'd done a lot of the hard work. We'd put in place our market management side, we'd put in place a lot of the other building blocks, which I think are paying off now. So in terms of competition today, I think at one level it's very easy to say that deep pockets equals tough competition. Yes, but I don't think that alone does it. So what does it is if you have, at the end of the day, a really good customer experience end to end. And I think if someone's going to give a good customer experience end to end, you will find people will come back to you. That's our philosophy, discount or no discount. I'm a firm believer that discounts don't last forever. It's impossible. There's, the reason for being a company is to generate profits and give a return to your shareholders. And at some point of time, everyone will ask for that return. And when discounts dry up, I think it's that proverbial saying, right? When the tide comes out, you'll know who all's swimming with clothes on.
Speaking of discounts, my MakeMyTrip cashback is expiring shortly. Where does that leave the international OTAs? Do you think they still have any chance with the online hotel distribution market opening up, particularly Expedia and Booking?
Oh, absolutely. I think, we for once never think that, there's anyone else who's going to be a long-term competitor to us than actually the multinational brands. I think they're very savvy and they're waiting and watching. They're not in a hurry. They've got a lot of things going. So I think if we have this conversation 2 or 3 years from now, it'll be a different pecking order, except the position at the top. Everything else might change. So I think we will see some very interesting changes. And, I have to admire things like they're winning in markets without discounting. They're winning because the customer experience is fantastic. And I think if you keep solving customer problems and doing it in a smart, scalable manner, you will win. And I think the focus has to be there, but not in terms of can you keep people just because you have another coupon or you have another coupon. So,
talking about hotels, it's a bit chaotic right now. It's great from a customer perspective, but the plumbing and everything that's going on, it's quite chaotic. You've got, on one hand, a long tail of fragmented hotels. On the other, you've got brands like Oyo, Fab, Tribo, inject some predictability aspect. OTAs have also added their labels to the mix. Do you think all of this can coexist? And what do you think the customers want ultimately? Do they really want a brand attached, or it's just a comfortable experience?
No, actually, I think the market's maturing. And I think the reality is, except for the premium segment, 5 and 4 star, brands didn't stand for much in the budget segment. So we have 80,000 hotels and counting in the country. So probably some people say even 100,000 hotels, 1 million rooms. But I think if you go below the 4-star and maybe a few 3 stars, you start scratching your head, what do these brands stand for? So I think at one level, it's easy to kind of paste and to plaster a name and a brand, but really the consistency is the key. So I think time will really tell, because right now a lot of small hotels are also changing names and changing brands very often. But the customer is not asking for much. The customer is actually asking for, at this price point, in this location, can you give me these 3 or 4 basic amenities? And can it always be standard? So I don't have to be worried, or I don't have to be guessing, will my Wi-Fi work? Will the air conditioning run through the night seamlessly? Will I have hot and cold flowing water? That kind of stuff. I think that's all people are really looking for. If you get that, that's what some of the best brands in the world, if you look at the largest franchises in the hotel industry, that's what they were built on, and then they standardized everything. And that's evolving even today. There are new models which are coming out today, which are more compact spaces, but yet more functional, because the needs of the business traveler has changed. In leisure, it's again changing quite a lot. So I think this is a maturing of the industry. We will see more of this. But I think when the dust settles, you're going to see a few brands which will stay the course, and then you might see some which have kind of come in and come out, who really are driven by money power today.
So let's talk about mobile. Again, one of those aspects, if I look back less than 2 years ago, it stood at about a fourth or the fifth of transaction. Now, 80% of your hotel transactions are on mobile, and about 60% for flights, it's on mobile. What does that, I mean, where do you go from here? Has it hit the ceiling, or where do you, what happens?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And clearly India is a mobile market. I mean, there's no two things about it. The reality is that not everyone could afford a PC. So the mobile became a much cheaper way, not only to make your calls and stay connected, but then also to go online. Smartphones have become cheaper. At $50, you can get a pretty decent smartphone today, which is probably a knockoff or a clone of some other brand, but it works for a couple of years, and then people will discard it and then take another smartphone, etc. So I think it's become your ubiquitous kind of device. I think that at last count, there are probably 800 million people who have some kind of phone, smartphone or feature phone. More than half of them are connected to the internet and growing. The latest estimates from the telcos are that 800 million people will be connected over the next 3 years. So it's really going to be a staggering market.
But how do you tap them? These aren't primarily English-speaking.
It's actually, that's the most exciting part. And I was showing you something backstage, and I wish I had the opportunity to share that with the audience. But we are already building a conversational interface which can work with languages, different Indic languages. So the demo I showed you, my colleague is speaking in 4 different languages, and he's getting responses back, and he's booking a ticket, all seamlessly done, including payment through OTP, only through voice, and again in different languages. So it's already, I think that it's just so exciting how to tackle the 100 and the 200 million beyond the first 150, 200 million. So I think it's fair to say the first 200 million people in India will be comfortable, are comfortable with English, can make a booking quite easily in the English kind of, and the same sophisticated front ends that are there today. Beyond that, I think the interface will be very different. And while you can expect some people to migrate and to move up, some people are going to say, no, I'm more comfortable in what I'm used to. And it might be a chat format. It might be something entirely different. So I think the exciting part is to figure that out and to unlock that, not only language, so it's not a simple translation game, but the nuances of what is going to be interesting and appealing to them. 30 states of India, which you and I know, and a few other people in the audience are familiar, but more than 30 languages. So it's a really fascinating market to crack open beyond that 200 million. And that's the big prize that we are really playing for, where people who can't speak a word of English today, but have the money to travel, will tomorrow come to MakeMyTrip and will make a booking seamlessly and get done in under a minute. And that will be true joy for us.
Chetan, a quick question from the floor.
Sure.
Deep, how would MakeMyTrip be different today if it had been Expedia or Priceline to invest in you instead of Ctrip?
I think the company would be actually pretty much the same company that it is. I think we've, like I said, from Ctrip, we've got a lot of sage counsel, great advice. I have no doubt we would have got the same if we had taken strategic investment from either of the other 2 companies. But at the end of the day, it's the team at the company which is going to really determine what the company is going to be. I think it's wonderful to have a board to bounce ideas off, to get advice, but I've seen companies at the end of the day go ahead and do what they think is right for them. So I don't think we would have been very different.
Considering India is such a price-sensitive market and almost every booker is going to the place where they get the best discounts, in this scenario, you've launched a loyalty program as well. One is a very generic one. You earn something based on the bookings, but you've also now have a paid enrollment loyalty program. What is the rationale behind that?
So the reality is that in almost every retail industry around the world, and there's a lovely HBS study on this, 1/3 of the customers at the bottom of the pile are always bargain hunters.
Yeah.
But the top 2/3 are people who value service, and the top 25% typically tend to be people who attach a lot of premium to convenience and service. So our aim with MakeMyTrip Black, MMT Black, is really to lock in the best users. It's not surprising that we have been inspired by Amazon Prime and taken elements out of that, which is, the best users over time will transact a lot more with you and will actually not move away and give you a premium, and therefore it'll pay back. We don't intend to make money from that, and neither do we think it'll be a loss leader. We actually intend to just lock in the best customers. And then you have the big bulk in the middle, which is 45–50%, who some of them are going to move depending on the quantum of the discount. So I think there we've just got to keep raising the experience and make it so good, very similar to what I say. The metaphor is really when you're in a toll lane and you actually seamlessly can go, it's about how much do you need to slow down your car to go through that toll gate. So the best toll gates are the ones where you probably can keep going at a reasonable speed. The gate opens, you go through, the gate shuts. So it's got to be that seamless, the booking experience, that people are saying, I don't want to switch for getting a discount or getting a coupon of 5–10%.
Gentlemen, another question over to your left.
Is it too early for the Airbnb type market in India, and how would MakeMyTrip respond to that challenge?
I think the market's opening up for alternative accommodation. In fact, MakeMyTrip has got currently about 13,500 properties signed up on alternate accommodation. But it's still going to take a while for it to open up, reason being that secondary homes is still a fairly new phenomena in India. And the people who tend to have secondary homes are quite wealthy and they don't necessarily want to let them out. So we're seeing an interesting mix of people with primary homes, probably staying in one part of the house and letting out the rest of the house. But I think 3 or 4 years from now, my guess is going to be about 15% of the overall accommodation market, because India is actually it's a room-starved market right now. We don't have quite enough rooms.
Gentlemen, one more question. Thank you.
I know that guy.
Who doesn't?
Deep, before you leave the stage, there's a story that hasn't been told. When I first met you, the company was just a startup, hardly any employees. And you, like Steve Kaufer and Steve Hafner, in India, though, took the startup and you rang the bell for an IPO on Times Square in 2010. I know it's a big question, but what could you share with all these startup entrepreneurs about going from zero to IPO? How in the world did you do that?
Thank you for that, Philip. I do speak to a lot of young entrepreneurs as part of a not-for-profit organization called TIE, and the advice I give everyone is that firstly, it takes a long time in India to build a business. This is not Silicon Valley. You're not going to see a great business emerge in 2, 3, 4 years. You probably got to hang in there and stick in there for probably at least 5, 7 years to start seeing something which looks like a business, and maybe even 10 years. So I tell people to hang in there. I think it's easy to start a business today. If you're smart, you've got a good plan, someone will come and bankroll you. I think the toughest thing is to hang in there when the chips are down. And if I look back, I think there were enough times where we could have just said, we're done. Let's go back to our good corporate jobs. Most of us had reasonable degrees and we'd get a job. But I think there's a great value to what is called resilience in hindsight, but is nothing but stubbornness when you're in the moment. So that's what I think it is.
So we know that it's been quite a transformative last 3 years at MakeMyTrip. How do you think the next 3 to 5 years would look like now that the market's consolidated on one end, online market opening up, mobile being the new reality?
Yeah. So 2010, Philip mentioned IPO. We were 90% of our business, of our revenues came from air. Today, 67% of our business revenues come from non-air, out of which 56% is hotel, and the rest is bus ticketing, etc. And so therefore, it's changing dramatically. I think 3 or 4 years from now, you're going to see largely a hotel-driven company, but for us, air ticketing and bus ticketing are going to be the pipes to acquire customers, and we're going to cross-sell to them their accommodation needs. But it's not going to happen on the interface you see today. I think it's going to be dramatically different. You and I could be having a conversation on the side, make a booking while whispering into something, and
All right.
it might be very different.
Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, Deep Kalra.
Thank you very much.